Nothing beats a good game week routine. Today's Wednesday, and it's a stock watch. It's so great to be back on a normal schedule.
It's beautiful.
It's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. It's a podcast daily. Buckeyes played another game. A lot of guys helped themselves. Mm-hmm. I don't think a lot of them hurt themselves. So I bet these are going to be stocks that are all going up.
I don't know that anybody really hurt themselves. I can't remember the last time we did this, whether or not I talked about Quinshon Judkins. But I think maybe I did, but I'll do it again anyway. I don't care. He wasn't a prolific rusher against Texas. I think he only finished with 36 rushing yards on 9 carries. But if I recall correctly, his first carry of the game, he ran somebody over. It might have been the first play of the game, he ran somebody over. And the sideline got really into it. His touchdown runs were incredibly physical. He had that block on the run, the outside run, the Travion Henderson, where he put a guy in the dirt and people were crying about it should be targeting. It was just a good football play.
There was a lot of Texas crying about targeting.
Yeah. I thought the SEC soft.
I thought there was Texas tough too. Yeah. Does that not exist?
No, I think the S in SEC stands for soft.
Cram it.
So I'll take some more from Quinshon Judkins stock. I asked Chip Kelly about that on Tuesday. And Quinshon's always played with the physicality. I'm not trying to say he hasn't. Maybe there's just been more of it, I think, in the last couple of games, and perhaps that's just a function of him being healthier. I think running with more burst that's allowed him to basically run through people. But when you have a running back, and Travion Henderson does it too. I'm not trying to shortchange him, but when you have running backs who can set a physical tone like that, especially on the first play of the game, I didn't think Ohio State had any issue with Texas's physicality. I wondered honestly if they might, but I thought they were ready for that on both sides of the ball and doled out some of their own too, clearly, with Quinshon being chief among them. So they're going to need it again against Notre Dame. Notre Dame prides itself on its physicality. They want to run the ball a lot. They stop the run well. They got an offensive line that's dealing with some injuries, but I think they like Ohio State want to pride themselves on being a sort of an offensive line driven program, and it all comes back to. It's not even a toughness conversation I'm trying to have. It's just you're going to feel them when they're out there kind of thing. And I think Quinshon does a great job of helping establish that at a position other than the obvious ones on the offensive line. So I think he's in really good form right now. And so is Travion. As we've discussed, it's all kind of been part of the plan to get them both here. But I really like the way that Quinshon's played in the last 2 games.
That first touchdown run, the 9-yarder, I mean, that's one of the more impressive runs I can remember. Mm-hmm. That sounds like hyperbole, and it is, because it's
about as impressive of a 9-yard run as you can have.
I would say, yeah. Maybe I'll have to narrow it down. It was the most impressive 9-yard touchdown run that I can remember covering at Ohio State. Who I can't remember. Was it Derrick Henry that he used to compare? He's like a bowling ball covered in razor blades. That's what was in my mind watching Quinshon barrel towards the end zone. And he got a lot of help. The blocking was good. There was a hole for him to get through. Mecca was down there at the 2-yard line, finishing off another block to clear the path for Quinshon to get in there. He did not do it by himself, but if you're going to run in the red zone and you're going to run the longest to goal, outside the second longest, I guess, numerically, I know my numbers. You're going to get 9 yards in the red zone on second down against a team as talented, as big, as aggressive as Texas. You better be ready to rock. And I just think that was a tone setter, more so than just the first play. I thought the first touchdown told Texas what they were going to be in for. And if, there were penalties and a turnover in the third quarter later where Ohio State was shooting itself in the foot a little bit on offense. But boy, I think that told Texas, if you are begging for targeting calls or expecting this to be easy, you're going to be in for a very long day.
Yeah, it did. It almost felt like, Texas played a really good game, especially defensively. So I'm not trying to say they didn't, but it did. It felt like maybe Texas's sideline was a little surprised by the physicality that Ohio State started the game with. I think maybe the coaching staff was too, even when you think about the Sonny Styles hit on Gunnar Helm and start calling for targeting on a play where Sonny hit the guy in the chest. It's come on, man.
Stock down on Steve Sarkisian.
It's just a hard football hit, and to show up in that game from the SEC, and to think that some of those were borderline or questionable. It's just all right, well, if they think that, then I think Ohio State has an edge here.
Yeah, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
I think we've probably mentioned this a few times, but I don't know that I have, and I'm going to take a page out of the.
We are 16 games in, so we probably mentioned everything.
The Bill Landis offensive line Bible and talk about Luke Montgomery.
Yeah, good one.
That wasn't even really or not a rotation at left guard. Ohio State turned to him. Chip Kelly was giving a little bit more public confirmation. We've hinted around Austin Cervelt dealing with injuries. That sort of necessitated this rotation as much or more as Tegra hitting a little bit of a wall in November or a dip in production, however you want to view it. But they said in those practices coming out of the end of the regular season that Luke Montgomery was giving them a lot to think about. And they didn't put a full load on his plate against Tennessee. It was still a little bit in and out and sometimes up and down against Oregon. But they had to have Luke Montgomery answer the bell against Texas. And again, another very good, I mean, I keep saying it, like they are a really good defensive line. Mm-hmm. And Notre Dame is too, but I don't think they're quite to the same level of Texas. I don't know that they're even quite the same level as Tennessee, to be honest with you, especially with, the injuries that they're dealing with Mills up front. So, and that's not to discredit or challenge Notre Dame in any way, but even if they match what Texas did, Ohio State has just faced that, and Luke Montgomery has now faced that. And for those to be the first 3 starts or first 3 high leverage moments of his career in the playoff against that caliber of team and the way that he's played, that is remarkable at the end of his true sophomore year.
It is. It's like, yeah, I guess maybe the way I would put it is like, you want to show proper deference to Notre Dame. They are very good up front, but to have gone through the gauntlet that Ohio State's offensive line has gone through already, you should probably be confident against just about anybody, right? So, and especially a guy like Luke, who's learning a quasi new position on the fly. Like I thought it wasn't, it seems like a minor thing, but he was the guy that they trusted to do the silent count tap for the center too. Like there's a decent amount, I guess, on your shoulders there when you're doing that. He's been really solid. I think his athleticism shows up a lot when they're in the run game. Like he's, he lost the rep to Vernon Broughton, I think, on one play. Like, of course, he's not going to be perfect on every single snap, but again, like I came into this thinking, I don't know, that sounds a little risky, and the rotations worked well, and I think it has to start with Luke because he was a new guy in there, and that was the piece where you were uncertain whether or not that was going to look the way it had to look.
I think sometimes we, or me, I will speak for myself, we evaluate, nitpick, and talk about players and teams and units and schemes, and we hyper focus on the ones that didn't get away, and that makes the offensive line maybe trickier than any other spot because the 2 or 3 times that they may get beat in a game, or 4 or 5, you can still execute an offense, you can still score enough points to win, and you may still grade out a champion. Like the standard for them is 80%. They know that you're going to lose reps. I would say like they'll never do this, but like if you win 75% or 70% against a team that is like Texas or Notre Dame on Monday night, that Ohio State's probably going to do enough to win the game if that's what they get from those guys up front, because the other team they're playing is really good too. The old cliche is true and is said for a reason. They have scholarship players too, and Notre Dame, Texas, Oregon, and Tennessee all have very good ones. So, I think sometimes you just look at it, it's like, oh, well, they gave up 2 sacks in this game, or the running game wasn't quite as prolific, or they didn't beat somebody by 50. And that doesn't mean that there was lack of success up front. And the way that those 3 interior guys, I think they all deserve credit for the rotation, plus Carson Hinsman coming in, and they got some of the flowers primarily for the screen, which is taking advantage of their athleticism, letting them do some things to get themselves out there, whether that's on linebackers or down the field or whatever. I mean, it's helping everyone. I think it's fun to watch them grow and develop in real time because, again, for Luke Montgomery and Austin Cervelt specifically, this is being forced ahead of schedule for them.
I think they've done everything you could have asked of them, and probably a little more than that based off the matchups that they've had so far. So it's a credit to those 3. It's a credit to Justin Fry and Mike Seleni and Tim Drevno, I think, for giving them a good plan and getting them ready. But this is a national championship game of 2 teams that have had to weather a lot on their offensive lines. I think both of them have done an incredibly impressive job of finding a way to make that work to get to this point.
Okay, there we go.
Can I
got to the offensive line?
We did. Can I get a little bit of this? Might be a weird one, like stocking like Ohio State's punt team.
Oh,
like I thought you and Berm were talking about Joe McGuire, and maybe the average wasn't quite what it felt like as the game was happening, but that really felt to me like maybe the first game all year where Ohio State's punt team did an excellent job of flipping the field the way that it needs to. And
I agree.
It's Joe McGuire, I think showing a little more leg than he's had in the past. But it's also the Gunners getting down there and pressuring that punt returner. I know Isaiah Bond got loose on the one, but at least when he did, they knocked the ball out of his hands, right? So it wasn't an A+ effort, I guess. But in terms of field position, in a game where I think it really mattered, I thought the punt team was excellent. I think it could matter again in this game, or at least you want to be confident that Ohio State will be able to match Notre Dame's special team effectiveness, which is quite good. They're a little tricky. They put a lot of thought into it. They've done some weird stuff I know people have seen this year. I'm not saying that Ohio State has a responding kind with a trick play of its own on special teams, but it can't be a vulnerability going into this game in all the phases of it. But I think especially in the field position game, if it becomes a tighter game, which it's probably reasonable to expect that at least before we see the two teams on the field together. So I thought it was pretty encouraging to see that whole punting operation play the way that it did against Texas. This
will be a great test of that, as a true test, maybe, if you want to take it that far. Marcus Freeman, he played for Jim Tressel.
He did.
I think he certainly took the winner's manual to heart. The creativity that they've shown on special teams and the way that they look for edges, I think that's certainly Ohio State fans grew accustomed to that during the Tressel era. And even the emphasis I think that Urban Meyer placed on it was like, they're coming with the piranhas and the coverage and the freak show to go block punts, all the different creative names that they put on it. And the fact that you had starters out there and the legacy that Terry McLaurin left as a gunner and all these things. Like, I'm not saying that Ryan Day doesn't care about special teams, but I don't know that, the emphasis, and we talked about, Parker Fleming, and then the lack of fully maximizing that part of the game for the last several years. They made adjustments to that, but there's still been every game. It's like, well, maybe 3 out of 4 check this box, or you had the punt return, but this wasn't there. You missed 2 field goals in this game. That certainly cost them. It was absolutely encouraging for Ohio State to see that in the Cotton Bowl against Texas. But you have to have every base covered for this one, because there's just no question in my mind that Notre Dame is going to feel like the clearest path to finding an edge is going to be on special teams.
Yeah, they've done it throughout the year. They had a fake punt against Virginia that I think got called back because Notre Dame knew the rules better than the officials did. And obviously they had the kick return for a touchdown against Georgia. Then they had the play where they ran everybody off the field, and Kirby Smart didn't know the rules.
Yep.
He thought they had penalized.
Still didn't know them the next day.
Yeah. So they're very keyed in on that, and Ohio State. And Jim Knowles said on Tuesday they've been spending a lot of time on that. So I think Ohio State will be ready for it. I fully expect Notre Dame to have something on special teams, or maybe a couple things on special teams in this game. And like I said, maybe Ohio State gets up comfortably enough where it doesn't feel like it needs to do that. But there have been enough moments in tighter games where the special teams operations for Ohio State have not been as tight as you'd like them to be. So again, to see it happen against Texas in a game that was tight was nice to see, and they'll need it again on Monday night.
So I'm talking about the offensive line, and you're talking about special teams.
That's right. It's Freaky Wednesday.
Freaky Wednesday. A wild Wednesday. I talked to G. Scott on the Notebook after the game. I think Berm really.
That was excellent, by the way. If you're watching this and you haven't gone back and watched the Notebook yet, it was so good.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that one. A wide range of characters and cast that was involved in that. I think that's what I liked about it most. If you haven't seen it, just the variety of people, family members, a former offensive coordinator for this program on down the line. But G. Scott was one of them, and I think I would say I was among the people that were frustrated or skeptical of, say, G. Scott is going to go be a leader for this team, at least in training camp or back in March. Like when Will Kazmir came, I know I certainly talked a lot about, well, he's going to come in and be the number one, and he's going to be the all-around. And if you find a way to use G. Scott, great. If not, Ohio State could still be fine. And that may not have been fair to G. Scott, and it's a reminder of keeping the open mind and letting guys, players mature in the program, on the field, off the field, and G. Scott has absolutely done that. And the play that he made, Berm talked about it, Second Thoughts on Sunday as well. So a couple different shows that we mentioned it, but it bears repeating, because he could have easily checked out, and maybe there were times that that he almost did or was about to, and then came back. And that part of the journey is fascinating. I think it's going to be awesome when the last game is played for him, and he might be able to go into more detail about things that go deeper than the headbutt against Michigan, because there are a lot of them for him, and he deserves credit for sticking through it and responding and taking ownership and accountability. And then, going out there and breaking a couple tackles and adding 7 yards on the ground. And it wasn't just that. He made a catch earlier in the game where, from our vantage point in the press box, like, how did that even get there? And how did G. Scott catch it? It was like the ball skills that made him a 4 or 5 star wide receiver recruit 5 years ago were evident on that play. And he's been involved in more than just coming out of the gate and catching a gimmicky sort of route against Oregon. He has been a rugged blocker, not an elite blocker maybe, but he's doing what is being asked, and he's making tough catches. And certainly the yards after the catch were critical against Texas. So stock way up on that. And I'm not the first person to say it, and I probably won't be the last, but it's definitely worth calling that out.
I would say too, like maybe just stock up generally on not writing off a 5th-year player who's maybe not popped the way you thought he might, or had more downs than he's had ups. It's like a lot of times things click when a young man turns 22 or 23 years old and gets a little more perspective and starts, I don't know, like finding different ways to motivate themselves, like, I guess. And we've seen that happen around here a time or two. It's definitely happening with G. Scott right now. So at least I'm gonna keep it in mind too, when it's like, whenever down the road it's like, oh, that guy's still here, like, what's he gonna do? It's like, well, maybe he'll do what G. Scott's doing right now.
Yeah, we could probably rattle off 5 or 6 others who did the exact same thing. I don't know why Jayshon Cornell was the first one that came.
No, that's another
my
good
mind,
one. Yeah,
like,
another
that's
excellent example.
There are a lot of examples of that, and the value of that should not. I mean, Ty Hamilton's still here. Devon Hamilton was a late blooming option. Like, we could probably, that's a whole nother podcast, is the guys who have taken that G. Scott plan, or anyone else that we name, and maximize
a good off-season podcast. Yeah.
Let's write that one down. That's a good one. Got it.
Wrote it down.
All right.
Good.
What's your third stock?
Can I get someone like Ohio State's goal line defense?
I don't know that we've specifically invested in it.
I've loved, like, I saw like all the different screenshots of, like, here's the opponent, 1st and goal from the 2, they didn't score. And there was one I saw yesterday. There was like 5 different instances of an Ohio State opponent lined up inside the 5-yard line, 1st and goal to go. And somebody said, like, all these 5 scenarios, all this ended up with was 7 points for Ohio State, no points for the opponent. It is like I've been looking
6 though, right? Like 5,
6. Like, yeah. I've been looking to see
the Davison Igbinosun pick is the one that no one ever remembers.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's been there's at least 6. I don't know. There's probably more than that.
There may be, yeah.
I've been looking to try to. I guess I can go back in every game and track it, but stuff's happened. I don't really have time to do that. I just cannot imagine there's been another team in the country who's done that as often as Ohio State.
There's no way.
It's a heck of a thing to see a team in that position and be, like, fairly confident they're not going to score, or at least they're going to be held to a field goal and not get a touchdown. I think that's about the veteran nature of this defense. I think it's the confidence that Jim Knowles has. He even said, like, against Texas, the 3rd down play after the Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom stop on the sweep, and then the 4th down play with Jack Sawyer's strip sack. Those were 2 red zone coverages that Ohio State had not run before this season. And I think you can see it, like, watch Quinn Ewers trying to dissect it. Like, he has no idea where to go with the ball, especially on the sack by Jack. So, like, to be able to mix stuff like that in, to play with the physicality they play with, like guys like, Caden McDonald gets thrown out there to play one of, like, the 5 snaps he's played in the game, and you couldn't be more high leverage, and he's knocking somebody back. And
right.
JT Tuimoloau's getting in the backfield, and Arvell Reese is flowing to the ball. All the linebackers, like CJ Hicks, is out there for some of it. Like, just guys who were just kind of chilling on the sideline, having to come in cold, and then like play at their absolute best for the most high leverage snap of the game. And Ohio State's defense finds ways to do it over and over again. It's awesome to watch. Like, and it's been that way all year. And it showed up obviously in a major way against Texas, but it's been a calling card of this defense the entire season. And you're right. I don't think we've ever talked about it much or bought much stock in it. So there's probably plenty available. So I'll take all that's there.
I really wanted to be able to talk about it and say, well, it goes back to Jim Knowles arriving. And one of the meetings is like, give you an inch, we'll defend it. It's
Mhm.
like, well, you just installed this mentality, and it's all about the mentality. They've embraced that since day one, and now you're seeing this blossom in year 3, and you have more goal line stands than anybody else. But then he said that he called different coverages. It's like it wasn't just the mentality; like there was scheme involved.
You gotta layer a little scheme on top of the mentality.
I thought that was funny. It's like, well, it doesn't matter what you play, as long as you're tough, as long as you believe. Like that's what it all comes down to. And it's like, well, maybe it's not just. It's always both, right? I get that part, but it was like, again, we mentioned it on Tuesday. It's like blowing up the narratives. It's like it's never going to be just one thing.
No. But it's not always. You don't always have all the things you need, right? Like sometimes you can have the greatest tactician in the world, but you don't have the players good enough to do it, or a bunch of dogs out there and a coordinator doesn't know what he's doing. Like Ohio State has like all of it right now, especially on defense, but clearly on both sides of the ball, that when it gets into those moments, it has the schematic answers and it has like the, I don't know, fortitudinal I have no idea quality that you need and your players are getting it done there too.
The intestinal
fortitude.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm really jealous that you took that. That's a great one. Trying to think of someone who's under the radar to add to the stock watch, and I just can't because you might have known this about me, but I love Jermaine Matthews.
I do know that about you. Yeah, you wear it on your sleeves.
I have a type.
Yeah.
Ask any of the corners who've been through here in the last 10 years who play with his kind of confidence and swagger. But those aren't nothing but high leverage snaps and nothing but a tight game. And the third and fourth quarter, like I love Denzel too, because Denzel's got a lot of those same traits, but he wasn't able to play and they had to turn to Jermaine. And this wasn't Jermaine trying to expand the rotation. This wasn't Ohio State and Tim Walton, who's been walking in through here and marveling at the snow, like trying to, wanting to play Jermaine or, balancing the need to have 3 guys. Like he had to play Jermaine. Jermaine had to meet the moment. And I know that there's plenty of other credit that can go around for that defense because the safeties are elite. The pass rush was getting there. But, he answered the challenge. And then he let the Texas sideline know about it repeatedly, which is, I think, another part of the mentality of this team. I think if Bobby Carpenter has spent a lot of Mondays talking about guys who are wild cards. And I think there's a great mix of like veteran leadership plus confidence and swagger, whether that's Jermaine, whether that's Jeremiah Smith's mentality. I think you have to have all of it pieced together. You don't want to have guys who all play with the exact same mentality.
Yeah.
The chemistry of this team is good, and it's you want to have a mix. Sometimes it can be volatile, but this team I think seems to have the right one. And adding Jermaine to it when they had to was awesome to see in the Cotton Bowl. Like it was cool. And if Denzel, we'll see how close to 100% he gets by Monday night, but if not, Ohio State can feel reasonably confident that Jermaine can go and step in and do exactly what this senior and high NFL round draft pick is what he would provide for them. I think that's a tribute to Jermaine because again,
Definitely.
A year ago was another guy that's like, if I'm not gonna play and Denzel's back and Davis and Igbinosun's back, like see ya. He didn't do that either. So all that stuff I think is significant.
Doesn't it like now? I don't want to tread too much on bold peas before we get closer to the game, but doesn't it? It feels to me like Jermaine's got a game changer in him before the year's over. Just like he's answered the bell time and again throughout his 2 years here, or 3 years here. How long's he been here? 2 years here. When he's been put in the big spots, I think about him playing well against Penn State last year as a true freshman. Like none of it's too big for him. And like his wild card nature, I feel like doesn't show up between the whistles. It's just like he's talking a little mess afterward or before, perhaps. But like he's not going to do something reckless on a play. I don't think that would cost you. But I think because he's always locked in, he's always playing like really well positionally. He's a physical player. I think he might have a role to play in the national title game. Just kind of feels like he should.
You were finishing up the pregame spread at AT&T Stadium on Friday night when Texas was leaving for the locker room.
Mm.
Do you think that Jermaine was in the corner down there or not?
Yeah, I would assume that he was. Yeah, that's what he's always there.
I know. It's so
if you ever need to find Jermaine Matthews on a game day, he will be in the corner of the end zone closest to the opposing team's tunnel, right as warm-ups are ending.
You're going to find 24 there, and you're going to find 33 there.
You sure will. Yeah.
And they're going to let the opponents know about it. And again, that's great. I mean, there have been previous versions of this team, like thinking, 2-3 years ago, or maybe thinking of the Cam Brown like fight where he was all alone against Michigan. Where it was like there weren't enough dudes, maybe, or it seemed that way. And you don't want to get a stupid penalty. I'm not suggesting people come off the bench, but like during a pregame, who clearly are itching for that level of physicality and competitiveness and trash talk. Like you got to have some of them, and this team has enough.
Yeah, you can have too much. You can have too much. You can definitely have too little. I think Ohio State has a really nice balance where it's like you have like the stoic, for the most part, because Jack's a veteran. Veterans who are like, all right, we're ready to play. We got our plan. We're about our business. Let's go. And then you just have like young guys like running at people like they're
Brandon
unchained
and Jermaine Matthews. We'll name them. We'll name them specifically.
Yeah, those are the two. It's a great mix to have.
Yeah, and you see that showing up too on special teams, like the guys that are taking it to the whistle on that, and then talking trash even when they're just covering a punt, to bring it full circle back to special teams, because I am a simple man who loves special teams. Hey, it's Wednesday and it's been a stock watch. It's been great to get back on that routine, even though the game is on a Monday. We'll figure that part out later.
Yeah, that'll throw a wrench in the works, I think.
But we're all building up to that. Ohio State, Notre Dame Monday night. They're playing for one of these down there in Atlanta. We're another day closer to getting down there. Later today in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, we will be talking to, 5 players?
No, I think it's
6 players?
Six-ish players and Ryan Day.
We've got some players, and we will hear from Ryan Day again, and that will be the last media availability with Ohio State before they leave for Atlanta. Again, they fly out on Friday. The podcast will be leaving on Thursday to get ready for that. But there are still going to be, there's Kings of Columbus, which I think is a feelings. Is it a feelings episode, or did you guys?
Doug has promised a feelings episode, so
he was still getting into the feelings in the Saturday sound. It's a double feelings. There's Kings of the North because there's a lot to get to with Notre Dame coverage as well. So Bill and Doug will have that covered. We'll have the Daily. We'll have Snap Judgments later on today as well. So stick around for all that. Berm will be here, and I know that will be very exciting because we'll get a vibe check with him as he gets ready for a national championship game down there, shooting the photos on the sideline. So anyway, it's a long way of saying there's more content coming, but we appreciate you starting this Wednesday with a stock watch with us on the podcast. He's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. We'll talk to you later. See you.